Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out evil spirits and to heal every disease and sickness.
The Bible contains remarkable stories of miracles and divine interventions. Moses parted the sea. Peter healed a man lame from his mother's womb. Jesus drove demons out of people and raised others from the dead. But are these types of events still happening today?
We too have a beam of divine light and guidance that God has put within the heart of every man. And it's one of the greatest proofs that there is a God.
More amazing supernatural things are happening than we realize.
This is Divine Intervention, the interview show that features intriguing people who've experienced the hand of God in amazing ways. Divine Intervention was created and produced with the purpose of encouraging believers, spiritual seekers, and skeptics alike that Jesus is alive and is still performing miracles and working in the world today.
I believe in miracles.
Here's your host, Daniel Fazina.
Hello, friend, and welcome to Divine Intervention Radio. That's right, I am your host, Daniel Fazina. So excited, privileged, honored, and humbled as always to be with you. Got a wonderful show in store for you with some pretty cool guests who have some powerful testimonies of how the Lord has worked in their lives. And I know it's going to encourage you with some of the testimonies you're going to be hearing today. Before we get to our special guest, just want to remind you that you can find Divine Intervention Radio on divineinterventionradio.com. All the shows are archived there. Also on facebook.com/Divine Intervention Radio and youtube.com/Divine Intervention Radio. If you go to the Facebook page, please like the page and comment on it. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's going to let you know every time there is a new show uploaded. You'll get a notification there. All right, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first guest. His name is Stan Cottrell, and he is an amazing gentleman. He's 76 years young, and he is a world record-holding runner. And just to give you some idea of where this guy has gone and what he's done, he ran from New York to San Francisco in 48 days and set a new world record. That's in the Guinness Book of World Records. He ran across Europe in 80 days. He ran 2,152 miles in 53 days across the ancient, unknowable, forbidden land of China where foreigners had never been permitted. He's run across 40 different countries and has accumulated more than 250,000 miles of running in his 63-year career. That's more than 10 times around the earth. Yet Stan Cottrell believes the source of his power is more than mere physical. He's convinced that it is a source we can all tap into if we know how. He's an amazing Christian man, and you're going to hear his story of what propelled him and some of the divine interventions and miracles that he's experienced. And it's just a real privilege and an honor to meet this guy. He's kind of like a real-life Forrest Gump, and you'll understand why when we speak to him. I got to catch up with Stan Cottrell at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville, Tennessee, and we recorded the interview live on site. Please excuse the background noise. There is quite a bit. It was a noisy area, but enjoy the interview. I think it's going to encourage you. So let me welcome Stan Cottrell right now on Divine Intervention Radio. Stan, you are on Divine Intervention. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great being here with you.
Well,
this is awesome.
It's an honor to meet you finally. I've read so much about you. You've had an amazing life so far, a very illustrious career, and gosh, you've accomplished so much in your life, and we definitely want to talk about some of that. But before we do, why don't you take us to the beginning? Tell us about your background growing up, what that was like, and maybe how you came to faith in Jesus in the first place.
I like to tell people that I grew up in the poorest county in the state of Kentucky, which is the poorest county in the United States.
Wow.
It's even today, the poverty is almost like a third world country. But you know, when you're growing up, you don't know those kind of things. That's just your world you grow in. That's 100% of your reality.
Right.
So, but very early in my life, Dad would wake me up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Now I'm talking 5 years old, and go fetch the cows, bring them in. And those cows would never come to the barn. They were just out in the field somewhere. So I'd go run, bring them in. And when I was 6 years old, Dad said, "Well, it's time your chores they're going to pick up some, and I would miss the school bus 3 mornings out of every 5. And I would have to, I mean, you think about it. He's a 6-year-old boy running almost 6 miles to school 3 mornings a week.
You ran to school?
I ran. And
wait, was it uphill both ways?
Yeah, I'm listening to you. But it was, and so running was just a way of life. And I've told more than 5 million little youngsters. When I was 7 years old, I chased a rabbit one time for 5 hours. And I caught it. I wanted it for a pet.
That's amazing.
And my fame at that point started just spreading, and the farmers would come and borrow me more and more, and Dad'd say, take him. Now, Dad was 6'4" and weighed 240 pounds, and he thought something was wrong with me. He thought I had worms, and he had a lot of hounds that he gave worm medicine every month, and he'd give me a worm, and he didn't understand heredity. He just thought I was the runt of the litter. And so there's themes here of the importance of the father giving the blessing to the child, telling the child that he loved them. And I tell dads everywhere, one of the greatest gifts you can give your child is saying, Dad's proud of you. Well, I grew up and just thinking I felt inadequate, I was insecure, I felt inferior, and here I am on the backside of a place called nowhere in the world, and when they talked about potential and possibilities, nobody ever referred to me. And even at like 9 and 10 years old, I felt trapped inside, like, what can I do? And I'm never going to be big and tall like Daddy. And he wanted me to be a basketball star. Okay. And I came to the basketball people, I came about to their knees, let alone take a ball down the court and all that. Well, I dealt with all these kind of themes that you can't psychologically figure out as a 9-year-old. And Mama put her arms around me one day, and I said, Mama, why does Daddy love me? And she says, honey, he loves you. He may not be able to tell you, but I love you and God loves you. And she says, I know God's going to do something special with your life. Wow. Mama said, I know God's going to do something special with your life. And she said, I just want you to know you're special. And then she said this magic word. It's not good English, but she said a magic phrase. She said, I just want you to know you're specialer. And I have the opportunity to tell children and people, regardless of the years that's crossed their brow, because there's a little part in everybody that wants to feel like that they're specialer. And anyway, when they talked about potential, they didn't refer to me. 12 years old, county fair, they said, let's have a 100-yard dash one day. And I rolled up, I was barefooted, and I asked Daddy, please let me run in this thing. He said, I don't see much good in it, but go ahead. And all kind of people, different ages lined up, ready, set, go. Boom. I won the blue ribbon at the county fair. And
you were 12?
I was 12 years old.
Amazing.
And somebody, I guess it was a social worker coming through there, the poverty and all that kind of stuff. And he said, you sure are little, but them little legs sure can fly. And he said, you might just grow up to be a champion. And I said, wow, what's a champion? And he's commenced telling me about taking care of my body and all this. But I tell people all the time, and Daniel being with you right here today is a decision that I made as a 12-year-old boy. There is not an unimportant day in our life, not one single day that's unimportant. And I made a decision at 12 years old that I wanted to be a champion. Didn't know what it was, but I wanted to be that. And Dad would be, and I remember early in life, now Daddy would talk about the Bible, but he would talk when he was drunk. People said, your daddy had a drinking problem, didn't he? I said, no, he didn't have a drinking problem, he had a stalking problem. But he would be drunk and he would say, pray for wisdom, pray for wisdom. And I remember me and my cousin George Arthur, that may not be good English, but me and my cousin George Arthur, and we would baptize each other in the creek. We'd lay down in the creek and throw water on each other. And I remember even at 7 years old saying, dear God, I don't know what it is, but I want some of it. I'm praying for wisdom. And anyway, Mama knew a lot about God. She talked about it a lot, but I just hurt. because of just things you can't explain. You can't explain them. I'm getting dramatic here.
Oh, that's great. I love it. So how did you come to know this guy that you kind of knew about, maybe, but
knew about? And I come from I come from a praying family, and my great grandfather back in the early history of the early revival of Christianity in the United States. My great grandfather was one of the top leaders. It goes back there. My grandmother, and then this great grandfather of mine, I met him in 1949, and he was 98 years old. And I'll never forget this. He put his hand on my shoulder and he said, Lord, I'm praying for this little young'un, that your will would be mightily accomplished through him. Bless him, oh Lord, and I commit him to you for your service in your kingdom's work. Oh Lord, hallelujah, praise you for this little boy. And I remember that word for word, and I just sitting there and it was just wow. Well,
seems like his prayer is coming to fruition in your life.
In my running, I kept running and running. And like I say, when they talked about potential, they didn't refer to me. But one day in 1961, 2 weeks before I was to graduate from high school, I got a letter in the mail offering me a 1 semester partial probationary scholarship worth $60. And they were starting a new cross-country team at Western Kentucky State College then, just up the road here, about 45 miles.
Right.
And they said, well, he's fast, he can run, and he'll flunk out after the first semester, but we'll have him, he'll be eligible to run, until the grades come out. And I took the letter to my high school principal, and he said, you got to be smart to go to college. He said, you ain't got no sense. He said,
nice encouragement there.
This was career counseling.
Oh my goodness.
And he said, the only future you have in the world, go join the army, get that over with, and come back and live on your daddy's farm and marry a little fuzzy-headed girl I see you fooling around with in town every so often. He said, you're too stupid to go to college.
Wow.
And I sat there and I looked at him, and this was Kentucky language, okay? And I said, I'll learn you something, and I'll learn you, darn you. And I went off to college. 5 years later, I graduated, and with 4 majors in undergraduate. And the other thing that's important here...
Wait, you had 4 majors?
I ended up with 4 majors.
My goodness.
I know. And I held down 4 part-time jobs. I worked at a carburetor factory from 10 at night to 7 in the morning. And I do my classes all day long, and I'm still doing running. It's a miracle. It's a miracle.
That is a miracle.
And then, but Daniel, I have the opportunity to speak to youth groups, and I tell them, first of all, there's never an unimportant day of your life. Everything. There's about 4 significant markers in your life. You're born, you die. That's 2 of your significant markers.
Right.
And then the other decisions. In 12 years old, county fair. That was a marker in my life. But then I suppose that principle, I never ever thought I was ever dumb. A lot of things I didn't understand.
Sure.
But when he told me I was too dumb, something just rankled me on the inside. But I tell the youth, don't ever buy into anybody telling you that you're too dumb, you aren't tall enough, you aren't smart enough, you can't and do all this, because I said, anybody that tells you that you are less than the best of the best, that you're unique, you have a gift to the world, you're unique, you're a divine original, I said, that's a messenger from hell, and you say, be gone, you foul spirit, get out of my sight.
Amen.
Kick them in the rear end. Send them packing. Okay, we're going to fast forward.
Yes, I want to know, when did your faith become alive and real to you?
Okay. I remember 12 years old in a revival. And I heard the call of the Lord, in the invitation, and when they gave that invitation to this old-time gospel revival, I couldn't wait to run down front to give my life to the Lord. And it was so real. And then, so many times in churches, they just want to get you in, they dip you, and then they dropped you. There wasn't any continual program. And a couple old farmers up there, a few days later, said to me, I'll never forget it, said, I heard tell you got religion the other night. I said, yeah, I accepted Jesus Christ. And they said, you know, that means you can't cuss no more. And I didn't know that I was ever cussing. And I just kind of, I mean, that was that development.
The mentality they had.
Yeah. And the thing is, I never will forget, I was about 13 years old, and I don't know what it was. You know, you're a teenager, and that, but there was no guidance, there was no direction, there was all this, and the things that those wonderful old time preachers would get up there, you're going to hell, and they preached. I mean, it was just, you'd be scared to death.
No.
And I mean, and being lost and dying, yeah, that is a scary thought to die without. But I mean, you know, here you are in that they never taught about God as a loving Father, a gentle guide, a patient teacher, and He guides, He directs, He protects. Why? Because He cares, and you know, and all the things that you learn later on. It was a scare tactic. I mean, it was
fire and brimstone.
Fire and brimstone. And then they'd say, you know, the old devil's going to come and cut your head off and put you in a grass sack and take you and throw you in the pits of hell. And so you heard, you heard that all the time. Well, one time it was almost like I said, Jesus, excuse me just a minute, and I'll be right back. I was 13. It would be, I was 36. And I said, when I came back. And so the in-between, I thought having world records in running. Oh, yeah, I was going up in the eyes of the world. I graduated from college. I went to graduate school. I did all kind of crazy things. I mean, you know, and I was still wanting my dad's approval. I was wanting, and
you became a hyper overachiever.
Oh, major league, and
how many world records do you have?
Well, I held the world record running across the United States. That was 48 days.
48 days, right.
And averaging 66 miles a day.
My gosh, that's like doing more than a marathon every single day.
That's right.
48 days. I can't even imagine.
And let's see, 66 miles, that'd be 52. Yeah, it's 2.5 marathons a day.
Unbelievable.
And then I once ran for 24 hours and broke the world record as far as distance. I ran 167.25 miles in 24 hours, and that broke the record by 6 miles in 24 hours. I set an American record at for the 100 miles in 13 hours and 17 minutes. I once ran 4.5 days and went 405 miles, 81 miles a day on that.
My gosh.
And I don't know.
Do you think most of this was because of you were looking for your father's approval?
Oh, I wanted. Oh, and even when I graduated from college, and I begged him, I said, and the night I graduated from college at 6:30, I picked up, back in those days, soft drinks came in glass bottles, and you'd pick them up, you'd take them to the store and get 3 cents a piece for them. And I saved up enough money to be able to have a little room in a Western Sizzler restaurant and take Mom and Dad to after I graduated. And it's at 6:30. Graduation services started at 7. Mom and Dad weren't there. And I called home, and Mom picked up the phone, and I said, Mama, honey, what in the world? And she said, your daddy's just too tired. He's just too tired. And I mean, you know, there was nothing. When I came home the next day with my college degree, I said, well, Dad, here's my degree. He says, yeah. He said, it's time to get on your work clothes. You ain't no guest. You belong here. It's time to go to work.
My goodness.
And I'm thinking, what does it ever take? What does it ever take? And
I can't even imagine the heartbreak that you must have felt.
And then you got it. And then all these things that was going on, I finally got to the point, I said, if he would ever just acknowledge that I was his son, if he would ever say, I said, I get it, he's never going to tell me he loves me, but at least if he would just say he's proud of me and say I would consider it all complete. Well,
that ever happened?
Well, here's the funny thing. January 1980, 4 months before I was to start the first run across the United States. Hang on, this is drum roll time.
Okay.
That was 40 years ago, and when I start this run in April, it'll be almost 40 years to the day for this next run across the United States. Just something about 40 years in the Bible, isn't it?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
And then I'm being here with you. This is one of those 5 times that God in the Bible calls, and suddenly. And suddenly, I find myself from the backside of the desert to, and suddenly, 2 weeks ago, I mean, you know, it's, some people call this rebranding, all this kind of stuff. I don't know those big fancy terms, but I just call it God's timing.
That's right, because you're set to run across the country again in a friendship run.
That's right.
And you're 76 years young.
76,
right?
That's right.
Amazing.
Just a youngin'. But Mama calls me in January 1961 and says, Stanley Jr., we had to put your daddy in the hospital this morning. Said, and Daddy had never been to the hospital. I mean, he was just tougher than a pine knot. And she said, and boy, I dropped everything I was doing. 2 minutes later, I'm in the car coming from Atlanta up home in Kentucky. And I go straight to the hospital, and Daddy's sitting in there chewing tobacco and spitting in an old wastebasket. And he's got all these IV tubes in him. And I said, Daddy, you can't be chewing tobacco in the hospital. He said, I'll chew tobacco anywhere I please. And I said, okay. But he had a cross in his hand, and it was around some kind of chain necklace. And I said, well, Daddy, I didn't know you had that cross. He said, yeah. He said, this is reminding me of where my faith is. He said, and I said, I would hate to be anybody that wasn't a Christian. He said, that'd be the sorriest decision anybody ever made. And we sat there, and I was uncomfortable because, you know, even there on his hospital bed, there was a fear. And I don't have any teeth here. He knocked my teeth out when I was 17 years old with the butt of a shotgun. And so then in the hospital room, it's a little old county hospital, and this man comes walking in Daddy's room with the house coat on. And the man said, oh, I'm sorry, Stan. I didn't realize you had guests in here. And Daddy said, no, come on in. He said, this is my son, the one I've been telling you so much about, the one I'm so proud of. And I'm just sitting there, and God answered my prayer. And God knew that for the next 40 years, that was 40 years ago, that's a soundbite that I would need. 2 weeks later, we were burying Dad.
My gosh, what an amazing story. I'm so happy that prayer became answered.
Absolutely.
First of all, and I'm so thrilled that 40 years later, here you are again, 76 years young, ready to run across America again on this friendship run.
Very quickly. At first, I ran for me. I ran for trying to fulfill something that I thought having a world record would give me all the happiness. I ran, and 6 months after I set all these records, see, a person can't run to God's own son until they've run out of themselves. Nothing worked out. Whereas maybe other athletes, big contracts, everything didn't happen. And I went for a run one afternoon, and I couldn't run a mile. And I crawled up into the woods, and I started crying. I said, God, they say, invite you into my heart. I said, I symbolically rip open my chest cavity if you'll come in. If you want me to run, that's fine. If you never want me to run again, that's okay. If you want me to go back to Kentucky and just have an old mule and play out hillsides, whatever you want in my life, the answer is yes. And you know, God gave me back my running in a way that I never ever dreamed of. And I'm running across nations to tell about the good news. I'm a seed planter. I've had the opportunity of running and meeting the well-known to the unknown, from the palaces of the world to the White House and all this other kind of stuff. And I run down the road. I know I am in the center of God's perfect will, not permissive will, for my life. I run and I run and I run and I talk until at times I just say, Lord, and Mama says, pray your heart out, praise Jesus till you have to just take your hand and poke your tongue back in your mouth.
I love it. Friend, you're listening to Divine Intervention Radio, and our special guest has been Stan Cottrell. He is about to run across America again in this friendship run. Tell us, Stan, where we can find more information about it and how we can support you.
Well, thank you. I'll be running from City Hall, Los Angeles to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. It'll start April the 15th, and I think we're 100 days after that. I think it's around July the 23rd, 24th, somewhere in there. There's more information. But my website, now it's real easy, folks. Friendship Sports. Got that? Friendship Sports. And then it's an association, so it's friendshipsportsassociation.com. And it just says all kind of good things about me and what we're doing and so forth. And
friendshipsportsassociation.com. You've heard it from the man himself, the legend, Stan Cottrell, the real Forrest Gump. Check him out. friendshipsportsassociation.com, right?
I've done all the talking. I love y'all out there. And boy, if you're listening to Daniel, you're listening to the real deal.
Thank you so much. Stan Cottrell. God bless you, sir.
God bless you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes, sir.
You're listening to Divine Intervention with Daniel Fazzina, and we'll return in just a moment.
I believe in miracles.
Hey, this is Daniel Fazzina of Divine Intervention Radio. Jesus calmed a raging storm, healed paralytics, and even raised the dead. But are these types of events still happening today? The answer to this question, as you will see from reading my book, Divine Intervention, 50 True Stories of God's Miracles Today, is an emphatic yes. Contained within the book is a collection of amazing true stories that attest to this fact. More information about Divine Intervention, 50 True Stories of God's Miracles Today can be found at divineinterventionradio.com. Times are tough, not getting easier, but there's an opportunity that could make a significant change in your financial situation. People are paying too much for home utilities, and everybody has them. Help friends and family save money and get paid for it. No obligation. You don't even have to talk to anyone unless you want to. Just listen to a 3-minute recorded message. Call now, 715-GET-CASH. That's 715-GET-CASH. Listen, decide, and you could be on your way to a better tomorrow. 715-438-2274. That's 715-GET-CASH.
Hi, I'm Kevin McCullough. You may know me from Fox News Television or talk radio. I talk a lot about things that affect people's lives on a regular basis. And one of the things I've always wondered if people woke up wondering each morning is, could I work for myself? Could I find a business that would allow me to use the skills I have to pursue revenue that I need so that I can build a vision that I have? How would you like to be your own boss with no commute, no alarm clock, no employees or politics or compromises or discrimination? None of that educational requirement, but something positive that actually impacts people's lives. That's the opportunity of Ambit, an energy business that you can not only own now for less than $500, but make lots of money with. Call for your start today at 205-55-AMBIT. That's 205-55-AMBIT, or online at freepowernow.com.
Hi, I'm Lee Strobel, author of The Case for Christ and The Case for Miracles. You're listening to Divine Intervention Radio with Daniel Fazzina.
If today you should hear his voice, don't turn away. Now's the time that you should kneel and pray and finally say yes today. Suddenly you might have to spend eternity in a place you never want to be. Say yes today and just believe Christ, He died for all. There's no soul He wouldn't save. There's just one thing you have to do. Say yes today. Yes today.
Welcome back to Divine Intervention Radio. I'm your host, Daniel Fazzina, and I'm very excited to be with you. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending this hour with me. If you're just tuning in now, before the break, we were speaking with world record-holding runner Stan Cottrell, And on this side of the break, we're going to be speaking with an old friend of mine named Russ Jones. And Russ is a media guy. He's worked in a number of different capacities in Christian media. He's been a radio producer, and he's also been a radio host, done a lot of work with news as well, and just got a really varied background and very experienced in the media. And he's also an amazing Christian gentleman who's had some powerful testimonies in his life. Right now, his latest endeavor is he's working with the Abide app, which is an app that you can put on your phone, and it's all about finding peace with Abide. Listen to biblical meditations, sleep better, and stress less with Christ. So it's an app that'll help you sleep better with biblical meditations. It's a very cool app, and he's going to be talking a little bit about that, as well as sharing his personal testimony of how the Lord has worked in his life. If you want to get more information about the Abide app, you can go to abide.co, abide.co, and you can find out more there. I got to catch up with Russ at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville, Tennessee, and we had a very nice time sitting down and chatting and hearing about his testimony. So let's go to that interview, and again, it was recorded on site, so there's a lot of background noise, but please excuse that and enjoy this interview with Mr. Russ Jones right now on Divine Intervention Radio.
Russ, you are on Divine Intervention Radio. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you. I've known you for quite some time, but never been on your program, so it's a pleasure.
Honor to have you. For those who don't know about you, can you tell us a little bit about you? Maybe give us a little bio and maybe how you came to faith in the Lord in the first place.
Yeah, right. I've been in faith-based ministry media for some 30 years now, and it's been a long haul. Been all over the world. I've been very blessed. Things didn't start out that way in my life. I was raised in a media family in Kansas City, but my mom had me when she was very young. She was 17 years old, and then she got a divorce and never allowed me to have a relationship with my biological father.
Wow.
And she remarried a few years later, and I was legally adopted, and that man had a PR firm in Kansas City, and so I was raised in the business. It's all I've ever known. And then I went to Missouri and studied journalism, went to seminary and pastored for a number of years. But after some time, you start to wonder what your roots are outside of the Lord, of course, and outside of God. What are your earthly roots? And I started to look for my biological father, and this was back when there wasn't Google. This is when you called 411 information, and it cost you 50 cents to find out a phone number.
Did that work?
Well, I had an obituary column.
Oh boy!
From my father's funeral that my grandmother had given me, and at the bottom of obituaries, are the people that have survived. These are the people that still live, and I started to call those numbers and try to find where my biological father was. I didn't even know if he was alive. Was he alive? Was he in prison? Who knows? Been 30 years, 30 years, and I had no memory of him. My folks divorced when I was 2 or 3. I had no memory.
Did you have any pictures?
I did have a few pictures, black and white photos that my grandmother had given me.
Okay.
And his name was Russ Jones. And my name was Russ Jones, but then when my mom remarried, she rushed me into court to have my name legally changed to Russ Patton. Well, I later learned why she did that. She did that because she did not want my biological father to easily find me.
Wow.
She used to tell me, don't leave my side, don't go very far, somebody might come take you. Well, that somebody was my father, my earthly father. So I was calling all over the United States trying to find my father and get people had no idea where he is. Finally, one day, I get a hold of his brother, David Jones. Well, guess where he lived? He was 3 blocks from the seminary I'm attending.
Oh my God.
And I'm calling all over the country.
This is in Kansas City?
This is in Kansas City, Missouri. Wow. And he said, is this Rusty Jr.? I said, Rusty? Nobody's ever called me, Daniel. Nobody's ever called me Rusty. Please don't call me Rusty. And I said, I guess so. And he said, well, yeah, your dad is in Marysville, Ohio. He's remarried. He has some kids. And here's his phone number.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, oh, boy. I had that phone number for a long time. So I knew calling that number, I mean, it could change things.
Yeah, no kidding.
He could reject me. He could accept me. I don't know what's he going to do. I'll never forget sitting on the edge of the bed in the parsonage in Leavenworth, Kansas. I picked up the rotary phone and I dialed and called my dad, and I talked to my biological father for the very first time. And we had an amazing reunion. My son Joshua had just been born, and we drove across the country to Marysville, Ohio, and had Thanksgiving, and I got reunited with my biological father, and that went very, very well. Okay, and a few months later, I got an attorney, and I reclaimed my biological name.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So
your dad was happy to hear from you.
Yeah, he was very happy to hear from me, and we have a relationship to this day. And I just saw him, about a month ago.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, how did you actually come to faith in the Lord? You said you went to seminary and you were a pastor, but
right.
Maybe not. Were you raised in a Christian home?
Well, I was raised in a home that went to church.
Okay.
Rather irregularly. Maybe for not the purest of reasons. It was one of those churches that was a good place to be seen. Big church, church in Kansas. Country Club Christian Church was the name of it.
Oh, really? That was the actual name of it?
The Country Club Plaza, which is a very historic area. And but fortunately, there were some people there. The Thompson family, Jerry and Doris Thompson, who were lifelong Christian education people, had no desire to be the senior pastor. Those kind of people. You know who I'm talking about. Just loved young people. They pressed into me. They saw beyond the veneer. When my mom remarried, it was a nice home, PR company in Kansas City. And, they saw underneath all of that my mom was an alcoholic. And just lots of dysfunction, and they took me under their wing, and they embedded the seeds of faith in my life that would have eventually come full circle and caused me to evaluate. After I graduated from Missouri, I went into radio, and it was in that season of life that I felt a call to go into ministry, so I went to seminary. But I've always as you know, been involved with media, so media has been a ministry for me.
Right. And here we are at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville, where we actually met many years ago.
10 years now for me, my 10th year.
Wow. I think I met you maybe in 2011, I want to say.
That sounds about right. Mm-hmm.
That was my first year coming here. But now, how old were you when you learned that the man that your mother was married to was not your biological father?
Oh, I knew that.
You did? Okay.
I knew that.
Because I know from talking to a lot of people who don't have relationships with their own biological father, that kind of clouds their picture, or it affects their concept of God as a father. Was that an issue for you?
It was in some degree. I was in third grade when my mom married, so I just knew.
Okay.
And then I gained a brother in that marriage, and but I always pressed into people that were somewhat of a father figure, and I've done that even in my adult life.
Okay.
And along the way, I just saw that I need to take up this banner of the faith on my own. I can't depend on people in their walk, or that idea that, well, I'll just ride in on your coattails.
Right.
And it was, around. It's interesting. I was in ministry. But about 3 years in, I had a born-again experience. I know that may sound interesting to your listeners.
Well, sure, because you can go through the motions and be religious.
And I was wearing the robe and the stoles. I was in the United Methodist Church, and all of this stuff. And of all places, I was at a John Maxwell event on leadership. You just don't think about that.
Oh, I love John Maxwell.
I was sitting in enemy territory at a more evangelical church in Indianapolis, Indiana, at a John Maxwell leadership event. I was sitting in the very back row because at the time I was the director of public relations for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and I was at an independent Christian church that had left the denomination. I was in enemy, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes, enemy territory, listening to John Maxwell. And by the time I got through there, I was a puddle of tears. sitting in the very last pew, hoping no one would see me, and I could not go home the same way I got there. So and I packed up the robe, I packed up the stoles, and I re-engaged with the independent, non-denominational Christian church, which allowed me to truly be who I was called to be, in the faith. Because many of these places were more left-leaning in their faith. All roads lead to God.
What was it about that event that touched you and changed you?
Well, John's a storyteller, and we've lost the art of true storytelling. And how many times have we heard a testimony and we could have gone on home, but yet we had to go, the sermon was next, right? No offense, pastors, but sometimes the power of testimony is all you need.
Right.
And
that's why we do the show.
Yes. and he was quite a storyteller, so he delivered the faith and delivered how to be in ministry and still be yourself. But he shared the gospel in the terms of what it means to be a leader in such a way I'd never heard before. And we actually developed a relationship at that event. And then I went to several more after that, and it was quite an amazing event, which leads me here today to be with you, having been all over the world.
Wow.
And pressing into my life verse, which is Joel 2:25, that God will restore the years the locust has eaten. And he has done that.
Well, he certainly had you all over the place in different ministries and radio programs. You were producing with American Family Radio
That's
for
right.
a time.
Tony Perkins National Radio
right?
Show.
Good stuff. And now, before we get into what you're doing now with the Abide app, I want to ask you, what is the most amazing or supernatural or tangible, real God moment you've ever had, besides the one you mentioned there? I mean, if someone were to ask you, why do you believe in Jesus? Why is he real to you? What would you say?
I've had several experiences along my journey, and I've witnessed several things of traveling in other countries. I think we see the Holy Spirit very much alive in other countries,
right,
where they're not so encumbered by traditions. But a few years ago I had, and I haven't really talked about this, but I had an experience, Jesus has been my Lord for a long time now. But just a few years ago I felt a heaviness on my chest, and I woke my wife up from my verbalization. We were asleep, and I felt such a dark heaviness, like a gargoyle or something. I hate to be so graphic, but sitting on my chest. And I woke us all up screaming the name of Jesus.
This is in Asia, or
no? This was in America,
okay,
in our home. And the evil one does not like it when we bust free of those things that hold us back.
Right.
The evil one doesn't like my life verse being about God restoring the years the locusts have eaten. And I felt this heaviness, almost like I was trying to be suffocated and taken out. And my father-in-law, John McMullen, who is a Southern Baptist pastor, been preaching for 50-some years. I shared this with him. He said, Russ, that very well could have been the devil trying to take you out. And Jesus became so alive to me in that moment. And I know it sounds rather melodramatic, but it was very real to me.
Well, when you screamed out the name of Jesus, what happened?
No, it was released. I shot up out of bed.
Awesome.
Sat up in bed.
Well, spiritual warfare is real.
It was. And Jackie, my wife, she confirmed. She said, Russ, you were screaming the name of Jesus.
Wow.
So loud that, she sleeps through anything.
Yeah. Wow.
And powerful moment.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so Russ, take us to what you're doing now. You're now heading up or working with an app called Abide. And now it's kind of like a Christian meditation app.
That's right.
Tell us about it.
Two former Google employees, Christians living in San Francisco 4 or 5 years ago, left Google and took their knowledge of technology and created the Abide meditation app, which is on iPhones and Androids. And they felt a calling and a mission to use technology in very redemptive and missional ways. So they took this knowledge that was very alive and well in the secular mainstream space, and started using it in the Christian space that frankly we don't see very often. Christian ministry is just really out there using the technology that all of us are using, but we just don't see them used in the ways that we'd like to see them used. So they created the Abide Meditation app, and on iPhones and Androids you can hear Christian prayers and meditations. We help thousands of people, talking about sleep. Every night we put thousands of people to sleep using prayer and meditation, telling Bible bedtime stories. I never knew so many people struggled with insomnia. Had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't either.
But they do. I don't, but they do. And so we comfort them. Get comfortable in your bed. Allow the pillow to hold your head. I mean, we go through it. Take a deep breath. And we embrace biblical meditation. Now, you know, there's a lot of folks out there that talk about meditation. And it's not the kind of meditation I'm talking about. Those folks are into Buddhism and New Age kind of allow yourself to become empty. Well, I know what could happen if I allow my head to become empty and just to kind of like tofu to take on whatever it's being cooked with. You know, that's not a good thing. That's not going to turn out well. So we know that Jesus consistently removed himself he isolated himself into the wilderness to pray and to what? To meditate.
Right.
And the psalmist talks about meditation. So, friends, let's stop this notion that meditation is just for Buddhists and mindfulness people and the New Age movement. Sorry, that was ours. That one's ours.
Okay.
So let's take it back. Let's take it back and allow ourselves to truly be still. We just don't give ourselves permission to be still. And that's the irony. We're using the very technology that may be causing a lot of anxiety right now. There's a thing that's...
and insomnia even.
It's insomnia even. And there's a thing out there now where the pings and notifications on your phone cause anxiety and stress, causing you to feel like you have to instantly respond to a text message or a Facebook message. Well, isn't it ironic that we're using that very technology to bring comfort and peace?
That's wonderful.
And an oasis away from the insanity of the world.
Right.
And now, which I know is important to you, we have added a new category of healing prayers. They're not intended to help you go to sleep. They're not intended to help you meditate specifically. But we're pressing into illnesses like depression and cancer and anxiety and worry. We just did one on the fear of flying.
I could probably use that one.
We
Getting here was an ordeal.
on inner healing.
Yeah.
And so we have these on YouTube now, and they're on the app, and we're touching into something where people really have some need.
That's wonderful.
And they may be some of the best prayers you hear. Not all of us, have amazing prayer warriors in our life.
Right.
And we're not intended, by the way, to replace the church. We're not preachy, we leave preaching to others. We're not political, we leave political commentary to others. We're all about the Word of God. We're all about Yeshua, Jesus. We're about providing a platform for people to truly press in to the Lord.
That's wonderful. And it's called the Abide app. I guess you can find it on maybe Google Play.
Yeah, Google Play for Android and the App Store for iPhone, and we're on YouTube. And you can find more information on abide.co, not .com, but abide.co.
Okay.
And there's a free version, and then there's a paid premium version.
Wonderful. Now, I guess last quick question. What was it about this project that attracted you to want to get on board? Because your media, your background is in Christian radio and media and stuff, but this is kind of a departure for you.
It is. In that space, it's what are we mad at today? What's the latest outrage that we're chasing? That's just the reality of that space. And it raises a lot of money, too. And there's people that need to do that. And I humbly say I was pretty good at that. Who's the enemy today, and what's the cultural ill that we need to tackle? What's the Goliath that needs to be taken down? And that is definitely needed in our culture. But at the same time, there's a big, wide open terrain for this kind of activity and meditation and storytelling. We've lost the art of storytelling, and there was a big void of just good news. And so we don't get into that. We don't preach. We leave preaching to the pastors, and we encourage people, if you don't have a local church, you need to find a local church. But take us along your journey during the day when you're trying to rush out the door and you've only got 5 minutes. You're packing 5 lunches for 5 kids, trying to get them to school. When was the last time you went to church and you told the pastor, "Hey, pastor, I've only got 5 minutes today. Can you shorten that sermon?" I'm teasing, of course, but there's 2, 5, 10, and 15-minute links. So you're rushing out the door, push the 2 or the 5-minute button, and at least you've spent a little bit of time. Things calm down later in the day. Punch that 15 minutes and you soak in the longer meditation.
So do you have a place for people to give you feedback, or what kind of things are you hearing from people who use the app? Yeah, we get feedback all the time on the App Store and on our YouTube channel. We see, just the other day somebody said, "I used to take NyQuil to go to sleep." This is a true story. And now I use the Abide sleep stories to help me go to sleep. Wonderful. A couple of months ago, a lady had a razor blade in her wrist. She was ready to end it. Somebody got her onto the Abide app, and she's still with us. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to puff us up and said we stopped that. But God obviously used that moment and used the app to help somebody in a deep time of need. So we hear user feedback all the time. People struggling with their depression issues and anxiety. That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, friend, again, our guest has been Russ Jones. You can find more about the app, the Abide app, at abide.co. Russ, thank you so much for taking the time to share on Divine Intervention. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Divine Intervention with your host, Daniel Fazina. You can email Daniel at divineintervention@mail.com. That's divineintervention@mail.com. All programs of Divine Intervention are available online at divineinterventionradio.com. That's divineinterventionradio.com. Join us next time here on Divine Intervention.
Hi, Kevin McCullough of Fox News and Talk Radio. Let me ask you a question. Do you like the word free? Like free energy? Yeah, free electricity, free natural gas. Would that help your family budget on a month-to-month basis to get your energy bills eliminated from your month-to-month costs? Do you even know that it's possible to get free energy? Well, it completely is. My good friend Daniel Fazina is an independent energy consultant for a company called Ambit Energy, and he has put together a powerful presentation as to how you can get free energy and how to do it quickly. If you'd like more information, go to freepowernow.com. That's freepowernow.com. Or if you're ready to get free energy as fast as possible, get your energy bill and dial 205-55-AMBIT. That's 205-55-AMBIT.
Hey, this is Daniel Fazina of Divine Intervention Radio. The Bible contains some incredible stories of miracles and divine interventions. Jesus calmed a raging storm, healed paralytics, and even raised the dead. But are these types of events still happening today? The answer to this question, as you will see from reading my book, Divine Intervention, 50 True Stories of God's Miracles Today, is an emphatic yes. Contained within the book is a collection of amazing true stories that attest to this fact. You will read the astonishing first-hand accounts of people who have been healed of paralysis, terminal cancer, and tumors through prayer. You will see the love of God powerfully transform the life of an Islamic terrorist. You will witness the liberation of the demon-possessed, the resurrection of the dead, and much more. Prepare to be awed and inspired as you experience Divine Intervention. More information about Divine Intervention, 50 True Stories of God's Miracles Today can be found at www.divineinterventionradio.com or by calling 800-247-4784. That's 1-800-247-4784.